In the 1980s, things were changing for railways in Victoria. By late June of 1983, VicRail ceases to exist, and by July, V-Line is born as a statutory authority. It was out with the old blue and gold and in with the flash new corporate imagery embodied by V-Line's Tangerine and Grey. I'll just let the advertisement campaign from the 1980s speak for itself.
I pondered how far we've come with time. The state has grown and prospered.
Is it a truck? Is it a plane? No, it's Super Freighter! Faster than a speeding bullet. Fully containerized for maximum security.
Punctuality and economy. So when a new courier service promises to save us money and pick up from our doorstep, they better be here.
V-Line announced the arrival of fast-track courier right to your door.
Aggro? It's better than I thought.
All aboard, sir.
Come on.
Last year.
Remember the 80s? Good, because I don't. I wasn't even born yet. Anyway, V-Line undertook a program to upgrade its rather aging rolling stock. By the 1980s, most of their diesels were the smaller and less powerful classes. And generally, with the habits of rail freight transport changing throughout the 70s, for example, transitioning to bulk goods like wheat and other grains, and container freight, leaving behind the mixed goods traffic that was the norm during the 1970s and 60s. Such locomotives as the B, S and T classes were nearly 40 years old by the 1980s. This new effort on V-Line's part meant that more locomotives were needed to replace the old workhorses. V-Line began to make efforts in rebuilding some classes of locomotives. The P-Class were rebuilt from the old Series 1 T-Class locomotives. The A-Class were a modified and modernised rebuild of the elderly B-Class, rebuilt especially for passenger traffic, and totally new locomotives were on the horizon. From 1984 onwards, the G-Class locomotives were set to enter service alongside the speedy N-Class. The first 5 G-Class locomotives were an extension of Australian National's BL-Class order, pictured here. These first 5 locomotives were built at Clyde Rosewater in South Australia. These ones were G511 to G515 and were completed throughout 1984. The next set of G-Classes, built between December 1985 and April 1986, which were also built at Clyde Rosewater, were numbered G516 to G525. The third order of G-Classes, G526 to G536, were instead built at Clyde Somerton in Victoria, and so were all the remaining G-Classes. The third order began construction in 1988 and was completed by February 1989. The final order was G537 to G541, of which 3 were given names. The last G-Class was completed by December 1989. The 3 locomotives that were named were called G540, Witchy-Proof, G541, Birchip, and G542, named Warwicknable. The G-Class are essentially a more mechanically up-to-date version of the C-Class, with a different body. More sophisticated than their C-Class cousins, they were much better suited to hauling heavier trains. They were fitted with air-conditioned cabs, which I'm certain was a welcoming feature for the crews. What enabled them to haul heavier loads was the tri-mount type high-adhesion bogies and the Super Series wheel creep control system, giving them great adhesion on the rails and allow them to excel at heavy freight operations. The G-Classes were fitted with a GM EMD 16-cylinder 645E3B engine with a power output of 2,237 kilowatts, or 3,000 horsepower, making them very strong indeed, and were rated for a top speed of 115 km per hour, meaning on occasion they could even be seen on passenger trains as well. The locomotive weighed in at 127 tonnes, which is pretty typical for a locomotive of its size, with an axle loading of 21 tonnes and came in at a length of roughly 20 metres. The class in service can commonly be found on both the broad gauge and standard gauge lines of Victoria. When they just started out life, they were used on all types of services, but found themselves mainly hauling fast, heavy freight trains, such as the
Super Freighter!
and long bulk freight trains, typically wheat. By 1999, all 33 locomotives were included in the sale of V-Line freight to Freight Victoria, and then to Freight Australia. Freight Australia undertook a program to re-engine the G-Class with more powerful engines. 8 in total were upgraded to have the GM EMD 16x645F3B engine. But, as per usual with the tales of Victorian diesel locomotives, around the early 2000s, things begin to get complicated. Freight Australia was purchased by Pacific National in 2004. Most of the G-classes went over to Pacific National, and some retained their Freight Australia heritage, with PN still wearing Freight Australia green. 2 G-classes, G516 and G534, were handed over to CRT based on a contract with Freight Australia. After this, they were sold on to Queensland Rail National, who also bought a pair of X-classes. After that, G516 and G534 were sold on to Lynx Cargo, and then finally the pair was sold to Swift Transport. When Toll Holdings took over Pacific National in 2005, a condition enforced by the ACCC was that 9 G-Class locomotives had to be sold to SCT Logistics in 2007. When SCT received their own purpose-built locomotives, their G-Classes were again divided amongst the Australian Wheat Board, CFCLA, and the SSR. Then, in 2015, Freightliner purchased G533 and G535. Then Freightliner was bought out by a company called Genesee and Wyoming, and G533 and G535 were passed on to G&W Australia. Those guys. These same 2 engines were finally bought by Horizon, or GW became Horizon. It's very weird, and that the G-classes were tossed around like a game of hot potato. I suspect translating the research into a script, things became a little bit muddled, so if you know more about the subject better than I do, please put the correct story in the comments. The final disposition of the G-classes, according to Wikipedia, are 1 owned by Watco, 4 owned by QBE, 4 owned by SSR, 2 owned by Horizon, 20 are in service or stored by Pacific National, and hang on, there are 2 missing. 1 plus 4 is 5, 4 plus 9, 4 plus 5 is 9, 9 plus 2 is 11, 11 plus 20 is 31. To answer what happened to the missing 2 G-classes, we have to go back to 1999 in the rural Victorian city of Ararat. 2 G-classes were at the heads of separate trains when an employee changed the points at the Adelaide end of Ararat Yard, where a waiting ballast train was sat. I won't go into all the details, but an oncoming grain train collided with the front of the ballast train waiting in Ararat. When the 2 collided, it caused much damage to both locomotives. Both were written off and scrapped. The 2 locomotives in question were both G-classes. One was G517 and the other G518. In fact, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to cover the story in more detail in another separate video, or you can read the pretty lengthy online report. Yep. Well, that effectively covers the G-Class, I think. It's a pretty solid locomotive that has served anyone who has used them pretty well. They're powerful, reliable, and a frequent staple on many Victorian and interstate lines today. Well, I hope you enjoyed, as I'm Charles, and thank you for watching. And in addition to that, I want to extend yet another thank you to Peter Donaghy for helping me to research this video. And although, Peter, if you are watching, I wasn't able to use all of your information, as YouTube seems to favour my 12 to 7 minute videos, I am very grateful for all the information that you've given me about the G-Class, so thank you.
Where the water crane stood, but the birch and the elder still follow the track, standing black in the smoke and the rain. And the poor little sheep with a smouldering back runs away at the sound of a train.